I had a program that I kind of have scrapped, so now I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. But I want to read you a couple of poems from the early books. The first one is from Tin Can Tourist. I spent a little time as a teacher trying to explain the difference between abstract and concrete to students, and this poem was an attempt to try to embody that in called Physician's Heart. While you are off cutting people's rib cages open and courageously massaging hearts, I sit here and fuss over my spare diet. Sparagmos, a ritualistic dismemberment, and omophagy, the ritual eating of raw flesh. My Webster thirds fails me, rending, tearing, scattering, and my penchant for trichotomizing, haughty, inflexible, superstitious. I love you for your virtues. Life is valuable. The heart, I say, composed, isn't filled with passion. Seen any seats of misery, anger, or bewilderment, I ask? I will confess, sometimes while working on a tight column of verse about cures and maladies, I have a vain impulse to tear its side and let it bleed. I was arrested once. I didn't spend the night in jail. It was for public disobedience. But I had the good fortune of sharing my cell with Tony Kushner. So this poem is for Tony Kushner, and it's called Blades. Now sometimes I go back down in rodeo season and sit on the bleachers among members of the community where I was, as they say down there, raised like a turkey. Few of them remember who founded the rodeo, but many among them still like to tell the story of the time my father scored Gary Owens' horse's tail. Gary was 17 and, like all teenage cowboys, fancied himself a full-grown man. Their telling always ends on the tailgate after the finals evening, with BB cutting the cold melon old cowboy style with the same unwashed knife. Almost always it finally notes him handing Gary a half moon of the melon, and Gary balking with always the same question. Burley, is that the same knife you used earlier to thin my horse's tail? At that, the old-timers like to drop their heads, arch their backs a little, and thrash their thighs. It's storytelling body language. Everyone down there understands it. There's a double pleasure in the stories catching both the young and old together off their guard. The story never makes mention that I was sitting there and heard and saw clearly for myself my father's purple-mooned nails and the leathery backside of his hand. It never makes mention of Gary. A few years later, as a young, newly married man, the marriage would not last, nor be his only one, trying to make a living as a butcher in Stephenville and nearly slicing up his hand. It never includes that I studied at one of the leading universities of the nation, or anything of the day I was arrested taking part in a mass act of civil disobedience, of how that day in the snow we formed a circle when we realized they were going to take us, of how we tenderly collapsed into one another, looking up at all the elegantly dressed office workers that came to the great windows of the tall buildings surrounding us to see what would happen. A moment of calm and stillness descended. We moved in tighter, as if we could protect our edges. And from the most recent stateside book I'm very proud of, Self-Evident. This is a poem that takes place here in New York at the Metropolitan Opera, 2009. They did a production of Orfeo ed Eurydice. If you're not familiar with the way this production, they have like a big 3 tiers of people in the background curving, And it's where all the dead people, the historical figures like Abraham Lincoln and Queen Elizabeth and Cleopatra, all the historical ancestors are on these neat shelves on like a big spice rack as the background for the opera. And that's mentioned in the poem, so I don't want to lose you. Yeah, you can't hear me? I need to get it. I need to swallow the microphone. Oh, there's competing noise. Okay. Is that better if I eat it? Okay. Sorry. Did you hear the first poem? No? Okay. Sorry, guys in the front. Okay, this is Orfeo ed Eurydice, the Metropolitan Opera, 2009. Till death do we part. One is left with the razor, the brush, the soap, the closet to empty. We wind off into the city to catch Mark Morris's production of Gluck's Orfeo ed Eurydice. Those no longer walking in sunlight are shelved like spices in 3 very tall racks. Living eyes, free to choose their focus on the stage, move amiably about the historical characters' costumes. The chorus is classically grand. Their gestures casually synchronized, sitting or standing, each carefully embodying the place the procession ends. As this is art that knows it is art, winged love, sporting running shoes, and subtly bejeweled pink polo shirt descends by wires. The tiny stones in love's shirt divinely flicker and twinkle. After the theatrics of passion and loss, death spiritedly rewinds Eurydice up to Orfeo like a Jean Cocteau movie scene run in reverse. The gears of shepherds and nymphs, folk dancing in the sunlight, are colorful, joyous, and restorative. They sparkle a bit, like the strap of Orfeo's guitar, which love takes up. Every year, reliving the anniversary of the August 5th news of Marilyn Monroe's death, Who Killed Norma Jean unfurls itself in my head. Today, July 23rd, the devastating news is of Amy Winehouse. The heart wants what the heart wants, what the heart wants. Back to the rural setting. Mercy. The poem is called Mercy. That wasn't me asking for it. The cow has been sitting all day in one of the draws she has come down to, one of the draws before the front of our house. My mother feels pity for her. After all, the cow spent all yesterday with my father, uncle, and me up in the front pasture, in the scant shadow of a cedar tree. Because my wrists and hands are notably the most delicate of our lot, I was the one who took the knife up inside of her, who dismembered and withdrew each piece of the breached calf. My father, seeing that my mother is thinking about her thirst, has told her to leave her alone. Who, if anyone, will be there to give my parching tongue a swig of vinegar, broth, or water? I am passing through the yard gate and the house. My father is standing near a running faucet, washing out a bucket, when we see my mother in the distance, walking down the road to the cow with a red plastic dishpan and a pail half full of water. In the telecasts, the women dying of consumption are thin and willowy. They wear flowing, pristine gowns, have chiseled facial features and dramatic eyes. Even their photogenic hair falls with pathos in the scene. When my sister died, she was a middle-aged woman, gobby with a fad of depression grief, and swollen with steroids. Her neck was like the skin of a roasted turkey for all the X-ray, and her insides were cooked from all the shake and bake chemotherapy. As my mother pours water into the dishpan, the cow bolts up and knocks her down. The cow circles and passes again, knocking my rising mother to the ground a second time. We run down the hill, two cartoons, thrusting ourselves into a melodrama. My mother vigilantly coated my sister's lips with Vaseline, dipped wooden tongue depressors into water, and put them between her cracked lips, that she might find a bit of relief from her own radical heat. Okay. Viaticum. My mother was not perplexed when death came to her nursing home room. Had death a cardboard box, she would have surmised him a QVC delivery man. Had death a large rack of wings, she would have surmised him an angel. Had he worn a dark Greek helmet, she wouldn't have had reference for that. Anyway, where was the rustle of robes, the ferryman's obol, a palm, a crown, the soft, familiar hymn of legacy, the movement of clouds in benediction? And the last one I want to read is also from Self-Evident. It's a poem that takes place in Paris, oddly enough. And there's only one word, I don't want to lose you. The parterres. You know, a rose garden is cut into smaller beds, and those are parterres. So that's parts of a flower bed. Often they're raised and very beautiful. French make them very formal and symmetrical. And Malmaison is the house that Josephine built for herself outside of Paris. And if you ever go there, your assignment is to go to Paris and visit Malmaison. It's quite a nice day out there. You go out there and then have lunch at Chez Josephine, who's a restaurant nearby, walk around the trees. It's very beautiful. And it has all the furniture that Napoleon and Josephine lived with. At Malmaison, she could consider the cedar a celebration of one of his imperial victories every day from her window. It has outlived them, the decorum of their love, some of their promises and dreams. Today, a ways down the lane from before the Calichian guard gate, one can find a sustaining lunch at the Pavilion Josephine. Clumsy and concealing, the Malmaison site attendants are English caricatures of French rudeness. And the parterres of roses, once reported as amazing, dazzling in their array, are modest and have gone to weed. Imagine the gravel crunching beneath Napoleon's tread after Marengo. Rose resting, enlivened, considering some nuance of the slate roof, the transplanted cedar from her half-opened window, some notion of shelter, some notion of home. Thank you.